My name is Hinda Avery, and my show is called The Rosen Women. And the name, The Rosen Women, comes from my mother's family name, which was Rosen. And the basic theme in the show is about women as resistance fighters. So all my paintings have groups of women in them, and they're all resistance fighters. They're fighting against racial discrimination. They're fighting against social injustice, anything that they see needs rescuing, in other words. And I started on this theme because many members of my family, my mother's family, were murdered by the Nazis in World War II. And my mother left Poland before the war broke out and came to Canada. And that's how I was born. I was born in Canada. But those members, her family, who remained in Poland, were all murdered by the Nazis. And when I retired, I decided that I wanted to find out where they were murdered, how they were murdered, when they were murdered. And so I went to Poland and to Germany and other Eastern countries, and I tried to see if there were any records of my family. And while doing so, I visited several memorial sites and museums that are dedicated to World War II. And I didn't find any information whatsoever on my family. There doesn't seem to be any records. I mean, even though in some situations the Nazis kept very detailed records, in other cases there are no records whatsoever. So I wasn't able to find out anything. And I wanted to make some kind of connection with the women in my family that had been murdered. And for me, the only way of making this connection would be, or was, to paint these women. And I included myself and my late mother in the paintings. So my first paintings were only of the four of us. And in a way, these paintings became memorials. In a way, it was my way of commemorating those of my family that had been killed. Because even though I saw many memorials while in Poland and in particular in Germany, there were no memorials commemorating my family. So my paintings, in a way, became memorials. So the very first paintings I did were very small. They were small drawings, and they were not. The women were not resistance fighters. They were victims, because in reality that's what they were. They were victims. So I did a whole series of the four of us as victims, and they were very somber drawings. They lacked color. They lacked any kind of interest or distortion, at least in my mind. And so I just got tired of drawing the four of us as victims, and I decided to start drawing us as resistance fighters in sort of army garb. The first paintings, the women were nude and they were in a concentration camp. So when they became resistance fighters, they changed clothes and they were in army garb. But because they were not real resistance fighters, I felt I couldn't portray them as real resistance fighters, so I portrayed them as character actors in the role of real resistance fighters. So I did a lot of research, and I discovered the names and the history of many Jewish women resistance fighters, and I learned much about their courageous feats. It was amazing what these women did. In fact, they risked their lives every single day. They climbed through sewers, they infiltrated organizations, they passed for German. So in these paintings, I had text beside all the paintings saying that in the case of my aunt, whose name was Haya, I would say, Haya as, and then I would name the resistance fighter. My grandmother was Pessa, Pessa as the name of the resistance fighter. But anyways, I got a little tired of painting us that way, and I decided to include more women. So I included my late mother, or I had already included my late mother, but I included my late sister, cousins, aunts, and friends. And I painted them all as resistance fighters. But these paintings were still very somber. I used cool colors. The figures were painted in quite a realistic way, and not that exciting. And then I decided I didn't want to do this anymore, and I thought the only way I could get out of this mode is by distancing myself from the reality of the situation, the horrific history of the atrocity. So by distancing myself from the Holocaust, I could then come out of that mode and paint really whatever I wanted. But I wanted to continue painting the women as resistance fighters. But so I did so, and the paintings got bigger and bigger and more colorful, and the women started smiling and laughing. Their bodies became less realistic. They became more like caricatures, and they were no longer in the role of resistance fighters. They were now real resistance fighters. And so what you see in the exhibit is the women in this new way. And it is a fantasy of mine that these women are now resistance fighters. They're a little like, they're warrior women, or they're super women. And I'm actually in the process of making a film, and the figures in the painting some of the figures will be animated. So it'll be a film about my work. So that's one part of the show. The other part of the show is my latest work, where I have taken photographs, World War II photographs, and appropriated them and reconfigured them. So I have substituted the victims in these photographs that were interrogated or tortured by the Nazis, and I put in the Rosen Women. But the Rosen Women are not allowing the Nazis to empower them. They're not being victims. They're actually smiling, and they're enjoying themselves, and they're powerful, even though they're being rounded up or interrogated by the Nazis. And these are very, very large paintings. They're very colorful. The women are smiling, and that's my latest work. I'm hoping that the viewer will see the dark undercurrent even in these latest paintings, which are colorful and happy, because underneath the surface there really is that message of genocide. And I'm hoping the viewer will see that this is only a fantasy, that of course the reality of the situation was very, very different. And so for me it is a political statement that I am making, and in a way I'm saying we should all be resistance fighters and fight against any atrocities.